Today we're going to talk about legal entities for your company and which one makes sense for you. Now, people ask me all the time, what type of entities should I have? And the answer is, it depends. But there are generally a few standard types of entities, and each one has benefits, advantages, and some disadvantages, and we'll talk about those briefly today. The types we're going to talk about are a sole proprietorship, a limited liability company, a limited liability partnership, an S corporation, and a C corporation. So let's get to it. A sole proprietorship is essentially you. You are the sole proprietor. There is no separate legal entity. You and the company are the same. You own all the assets, you own all the liabilities. So if someone sues you, the company, they sue you. The benefits to a sole proprietorship is it's very easy to set up. You put a shingle up, but bam, you have a company. You can get a doing business as named certificate with the state, and it's about $20. And so it's very inexpensive. It's very simple. The taxes are easy. You would report all of your income and your assets on your individual tax return as part of your filing for your business as well as your individual income. And so it's very simple. The downside to a sole proprietorship is if you grow and you want to sell the business, you really can't sell a sole proprietorship. You can sell assets or inventory, intellectual property, but in order to sell the company, you'd have to convert it to a different type of entity. Also, the liability is not limited, it's to you. So if someone sues the company, they would be suing you. So if you have any sort of risk in the company, you'll probably need insurance. That's a sole proprietorship. The next type of company is a limited liability company, or an LLC. And this is pretty common type of entity. And I always describe it as sort of the next step. You have a sole proprietorship and you sort of grow to a point where you need multiple investors, or you want to sell the company eventually, you would need an LLC, and that's a good stepping stone. So the differences are an LLC can have multiple owners, not just one. All of the taxes are passed through to the owners via a tax reporting mechanism. So everyone gets a piece of the pie for the income, and they report it on their individual tax returns, and there are forms for that. But it's a pass-through entity, which is a good thing. It has limited liability, hence its name. So the liabilities are limited to the extent of the assets. So if someone sues the company, they're suing the company. They're not suing you individually. So that's a good thing. The downsides are that it's more paperwork, it's a little more administration, it's a little more costly to manage, and for tax purposes and for just general reporting purposes. But it's a good middle ground once you have multiple investors or multiple owners in a company and you want to grow and expand the business. The next type of entity is a limited liability partnership. And this is similar to an LLC in that it's passed through taxes. It passes through to the owners, and the taxable income does. It also has limited liability to the company, similar to an LLC. And it can have multiple owners and investors in an LLP, a limited liability partnership. One of the differences, though, is that, and by the way, these entities are most common for professional service firms. So accounting firms, law firms, medical, physician practices, places where you have an individual who's providing significant service to their client. And so an LLP allows for limited liability, but to the extent that one of the partners has a malpractice lawsuit or has misconduct or something goes awry with one of the partners, the liabilities for those instances could pass through to the partner, and the partner may be liable for those wrongdoings, and that protects the rest of the firm, right? So the rest of the firm isn't damaged because there's one bad apple, and that's kind of one of the reasons to have an LLP. But that's when you would typically have one as a professional service firm. The next type of entity, and I'm going to talk about corporations in general, and there are two types. There are S corps and there are C corps. And I'm going to talk about them sort of side by side, and so you can understand the differences and the similarities between them. So both of them are their own standalone legal entities. So they stand on their own. They're like people, right? So they're not like I have a company. They are the entity. And so they can have multiple investors, they can have multiple owners. One of the difference between the ownership structure, while they can both have multiple, an S corp is limited to 100 owners, and the types of owners are limited to. So a corporation can't own an S corp. Most often S corps are held by trusts wealthy individuals, angel investors, those types of entities would be investors and owners in an S Corp. That's most common. And a C Corp could have infinite number of owners. IBM is a C Corp, right? It's on the stock exchange, etc. So, but they both have multiple owners. An S Corp has one class of stock, common stock. A C Corp can have multiple classes, preferred, common, A, B, C, all types of different stocks. So those are a little bit of the differences too. But they both have stock, which is different than the other types of entities. One of the big differences between them is that an S Corp has the same tax structure as like an LLC, in that all the taxes are passed through to the owners, and they report income on their individual tax returns. And that's a good thing. It's called pass-through taxes. A C Corp is different in that it's double taxed, and you'll hear people say, oh, double taxation with a C Corp. And what they're referring to is the legal entity itself pays taxes. So the C Corp itself will file a tax return with the IRS and pay its own taxes on its own income. And then when it distributes income through the form of dividends, those dividends are taxed by the receivers of the dividends. So really all of the income is taxed twice, and so that's what they mean when they say double taxation. That's not the case with an S Corp, where it just passes through straight to the individual, and then that's where the taxes are paid. But there are limitations, obviously, for an S Corp. So both the corporations require more paperwork. They're more cumbersome to administer from a tax and a legal perspective. However, they both have infinite liability protection, right? So they, by definition, they stand by themselves. That's really good. And they're the most, the best for raising capital. If you're raising money from a large venture investor or, another large corporation, etc., those types of entities would be better suited. One of those might be better suited depending on the types of investments you're taking in than potentially an LLC. So those are some of the differences between the types of legal entities. I hope this was helpful. So for more tips just like this, visit our website at financepinnacle.com. Thanks.